Hey, Teresa. Hey, Teresa. Sorry about the delay. The executive committee ran late. And I was like, we need to cut this.
Okay, well, you had me panicking. Hopefully everybody else will be able to get in.
Yeah, we have several people queued up. I don't know if you want to do a quick practice share or we can
Yeah,
just
let me
figure out.
just check
Okay.
it really quick. It does not have me able to share though.
Oh, let me make you a co-host. Cool. You should have full admin rights.
Okay, let me see here. If I can get the one that's got the PowerPoint. Okay, are you seeing the PowerPoint?
Yes, it's coming through clear and beautiful. I can see your cursor too, and the little pop-up to move it forward, but I'm not seeing any notes of that, which is good.
I need to check. There's a couple videos in here, so I just want to make sure they will run. Oh, good. Yep, it's running. Cool.
Awesome.
That helps me know that these work. Yep, great.
Cool, I hear the sound. So good on this end.
Great. I will take it back to the beginning and we should be good to go. I want to ask you one question here before I
Yeah.
can you see anything on my end as far, all you see is the PowerPoint, correct?
Yeah, I'm seeing some PowerPoint on my end.
Okay, good. I can go along with the notes then while they're, I always get nervous about,
Yeah, I've seen it.
But yeah, okay. I think we're good.
All right, well, thanks for being here. I'll start letting people in.
Thank you. And I'm going to watch my email for my group.
Let's see. Well, good evening, everyone. Wait a second. See a lot of connecting the audio cues coming up. And well, looks okay. It looks like most everyone's connected. Great to see everyone tonight. So if you didn't know, this is the Southeast Uplift Land Use Transportation Committee. We have a very packed full agenda tonight. We have updates from the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. Hopefully I got all those words correct. We also have Lower Southeast Rising Area Plan to give an update, as well as building a better A2nd Avenue from PBOT to give an update on that project. So try and keep us really on schedule tonight. So we'll start promptly at 7:10. But if you have like any important updates or things you want to draw attention to, please go ahead and just enter it in the chat. And I also ask that you, if you're here on behalf of an organization, put that too in your display name. So for example, I'm here from Southeast Uplift, so that's on my name. You can right click 3 buttons on your profile if you're on the Zoom, Brady Bunch window, and drop down, click rename to rename yourself. All right. Some quick updates. So the Southeast Uplift Board Directors did approve moving forward with advocacy requests related to the eventual jurisdictional transfer of Powell Boulevard from ODOT to PBOT. So I could reach out to you all about if someone wants to be kind of like a chair of this effort. It doesn't remove the authority from the board, but rather just gives the go ahead that they're in agreement by and large with efforts to improve safety on the corridor. And so thank you everyone for the robust discussion last month about how to move forward on that process, or what the concerns were. And thank you for allowing everyone in. Phoebe, are you here with us? Or is it Lindsay? Lindsay, are you? Oh, Lindsay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right, so well, we have a minute. I guess, like I said, if you want to just do introductions in the chat, that'd probably be the best way to keep us on schedule. Encourage you to, particularly if there's any calls to actions or events you want to highlight, encourage you to do so. And we do have just a couple more minutes. So if someone would like to just have a moment of the floor and just provide an update, I'd welcome that too. Steve, welcome. And we have a few more people still connecting, so we can jump right into your presentation, the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project, in a second.
Matthew, just to let you know, Rose Gerber, who usually does our presentation, she's usually who starts us off. She's having trouble with her audio and her video.
Would it help here? I just elevate you to co-host, Rose. Hopefully that helps, at least on our end, if that's the holdup.
I'll text her and see if she can hear you. I know she was having trouble even hearing you.
And can everyone else hear me all right? Okay, fantastic. Well, it's just about time. Like Teresa, do you want to, are you and Rose about ready to present, or?
Can folks hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Great. I can hear and see you, and you can hear me, but I will not be able to be seen. I think I have that limitation where I'm at with my setup, and I apologize for that.
Well, glad you can make it tonight, and thanks for presenting an update to the Southeast Uplift Land Use Committee.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
Teresa, I think you are managing the slides, so you should be able to start us off if you'd like.
Yes, I'll take us through these slides, and Teresa will help me transition through them. Thank you so much for having us this evening. We're really glad to be here. We are here to present about the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project to your coalition. And I'd like to go to the next slide, please. I am Rose Gerber, the Public Outreach and Media Manager for the project. And with me tonight is August Chesser, the Senior Roadway Engineer for the project.
Roadway engineer. Yeah, right.
All right. So we like to share some general information about the project, and a lot of folks ask why this project and why now. The next slide, please. The project will address the top traffic bottleneck in Oregon with 12 hours of congestion each day through this section of I-5 and safety concerns, including the highest crash rate of any urban highway in Oregon. The initial studies and plannings to address safety and congestion on I-5 began in the 1980s. And by the 2000s, initial design and concept reviews were underway. In 2017, funding for the project was approved for design and construction. And also a mandate to do business differently from ODOT to focus more on community engagement and to align with some core values that we'll go over in a little bit. Next slide, please. From that point on, with the was born kind of a larger strategy to address the congestion and safety issues in the metro area. That larger strategy is the urban mobility strategy, and it encompasses a few other large projects like the Rose Quarter. You're probably familiar or may have heard of the I-5 Interstate Bridge Replacement Program, the I-5 205 improvement seismic upgrades with the Abernathy Bridge, and a few of the other ones you see here, as well as the Oregon Toll Program. Next slide, please. For those of you who may not be familiar with the entire scope of where the Rose Quarter project area is, it is an area that's a stretch of I-5 between I-84 and I-405. In the Portland region, the stretch of I-5 is critical for moving goods, commuters traveling to and from Portland, and locals traveling within the region. Next slide, please. Thank you. So each year, ODOT carefully evaluates all the segments of the state highway system using the Safety Priority Index System, or what we call SPIS. It helps identify sites that are most likely to benefit from safety improvements based on existing crash rates, frequency, and severity. And SPIS sites in the top 5 and 10% are considered for safety improvement projects by ODOT. And the project SPIS sites often occur in a series of multiple mile markers that are designated as segments within the project's I-5 corridor. So all segments shown here are shown in the top 5% of SPIS sites. So translation, we have some of the top SPIS sites in the state in this 1.8 mile stretch on I-5. Next slide, please. So how do we do business differently? Well, on this project, we are starting by acknowledging the past harms. We're working not to repeat the past harms by using a restorative justice lens in our approach on this project. Next slide. And the following photos are going to kind of tell a story about how we are doing that. We are focusing on the restorative justice opportunities for a historic albina community. These photos show kind of the once thriving Black community in the project area before the highway was built. Here you have children playing in albina in the playground. To the right is Dean's Beauty Barbershop and Salon. It's the oldest African American salon in Portland, and they've been in business since 1956. Now, they're still there, thankfully, but many other businesses like Dean's were removed through eminent domain with the construction of I-5. Next slide, please. Just a few other photos of the area. Children at a picnic in albina, and then over here we have them doing some neighborhood cleanup there. And the next slide, please. And this is a hill block on the left here. It's the kind of heartbeat of historic albina. People used to be able to walk pretty much from any part of albina to this hub where a lot of businesses were located. And the onion domed kind of cupola you see at the top of the hill block building is now residing in Dawson Park there, and it was kind of preserved to commemorate that neighborhood. Next slide, please. With the building of I-5 came eminent domain that was forced to remove hundreds of families and businesses, and they relocated. Here's an actual archival footage of one of those homes being removed. Families were compensated for the cost of their home, but the choice was not theirs to stay or to go. All right, next slide. Thank you. Here is an actual plot map of the lines that were drawn around homes that were slated for removal. And you have the kind of, if you were able to zoom in here, you would see the names of homes. Some of our historic albina board members are able to kind of zoom in here and locate their family's home that was removed in the building of I-5. Next slide, please. So with the that removal came just some pretty stunning, also archival footages that we have here of that initial building, kind of just tearing a nice swath through the neighborhoods, and just kind of gives you a sense of how really that disrupted and devastated that area. And next slide, please. We had a video created that kind of outlines the vibrant community that was there, but also the descendants of those who lived there and how they still are a vibrant and thriving community, and how they talk about that sense of place that was historic albina, and how this project kind of ties into the restorative justice opportunities that can be found on the project. So we'll share this when Teresa's able to get it going.
Let me know if you can hear it.
I don't think we can hear it, Teresa.
My apologies. I need to reshare.
Henry Kaiser, who's building these ships, and they create Vanport. So the flood happens in 1948, wipes out Vanport, and now people are forced into the city, and ultimately became Albina, or a space called Albina. And Albina was its actual own city. There was actually a mayor of Albina. So Portland didn't want the black folk and the poor folk, and Vancouver didn't want the black folk and the poor folks, hence Vanport, this compromise that gets wiped out through a flood.
Albina was the area where it was really kicking, you know, I mean, it was really, really, really nice. Anything that you wanted in the area, television repair, shoe repair, record store, dry cleaners, whatever was there. And you didn't have to go out of your community to get anything, you know.
I vividly remember as a kid going with my mom and my great-grandmother to visit different elders in the community at their home and checking in on people and dropping off food and picking up a chicken dinner from this church's fundraiser, because there were so many black churches that were significant in our black community.
The Albina area before the Motor Center, prior, because I can go way past before that, like, because the 60s, I was born in 1960. We could run in the street, we played kickball in the street, we ran up and down the streets. There was a ton of black people. So it was like a little community of people that everybody knew you, everybody looked out for you. Now, because of the Motor Center, the parking's crazy, there's people that don't look like you anymore. The neighborhood has changed drastically.
Well, you know, when I think back to when I arrived in Portland, I didn't arrive without knowledge of Portland. You know, I was at the college playing ball, like a lot of young people, thinking that I was going to go to the next level, and ended up staying. You know, started a family. But what I recall is seeing the incremental removal of the neighborhood. I recall seeing the allowance of decay.
I know that ODOT played a significant role in dismantling and destroying the Albina community. With working for ODOT, I know, given the history in constructing I-5, doing it without the community's voice, which led to the construction of I-5 through historic Albina, was the wrong way to go, and we are definitely in a trust deficit.
If we're going to talk about how great Portland is, how great Oregon is, what about the community and the people, the people who've been here for generations? What needs to happen to correct some of the things of the past, but then also include those communities in the conversations and the planning for moving forward?
The I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project is a transportation project, but it's also so much more than that. It's a community building project as well. So from the transportation side, we are making it safer and less congested on the I-5 corridor, where 3 interstates are coming together. So we're focused on I-5 between Interstate 84 to the south and Interstate 405 to the north, in the heart of Albina, in the heart of Rose Quarter. We get asked a lot, what is a highway cover? It is a wide bridge, think of it as a land bridge or a cover, a cap over I-5. So it will provide the space for roadways to connect over I-5, but also new community space on top. ODOT's role is to build that canvas, that space, and then we will be looking to the community to help us define what is that place that will be on top of the highway cover.
I look at this project as an opportunity for economic advancement for Black Portlanders, from a ownership standpoint for businesses, from an ownership standpoint for homes.
The economic benefit from this project will give Black people more choices. We don't want low-income housing or moderate-income housing. We want the ability to have choices of where we want to live and how we want to live. That's the big outcome that we should be trying to focus this new project on.
We can look at what happened to us in terms of the displacement And we can look at the people who kicked down the doors and the giants that came before us to get us to this position where we are now, right? Regardless of how people feel about it, ODOT has been very intentional in bringing the community together.
There's a healing that I think needs to take place, and maybe this project is big enough to begin to kind of prod us to say, where are we? What do we need to do for future generations? But there are so many opportunities for new collaboration, new business, artists to be involved, folks to become journeymen in trades. So really this is kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity for us to capitalize on what infrastructure projects, what needs to be done, you know, logistically for transportation and safety. And my hope is that we leverage all of it.
All right, thank you, Teresa. So as I mentioned, we have some kind of North Star values on this project that are leading the way in terms of how we plan and design the project. The restorative justice value is about creating equitable outcomes, but it's acknowledging, as I mentioned earlier, the harm done, but also the work to correct the systems that ODOT has in place that cause that harm. And the highway cover and the design, the highway hybrid 3 concept cover, as we're calling it, is an example of how we're weaving this value into project design. So original designs did not really serve the community. Once it was shared widely, we got a lot of feedback on how it just wasn't a place where community could be built. It didn't include developable land on top. It was 2 separate covers. And we heard that. We went back to the drawing board, and the current proposed design, which we'll share later, is in the middle of a comment period, will create opportunities that contribute to restorative justice for the Black community, such as the developable land, new community spaces, and with what that looks like ultimately will be decided by the community and the city in a community agreement framework moving forward. Next slide, please. Also, on this topic of restorative justice comes the workforce opportunities that arise as part of the project. ODOT is dedicated to developing a diverse workforce and expanding economic opportunity through the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. We're reshaping the way we do business by taking a more collaborative and transparent approach to contracting, active community engagement, and minority-owned disadvantaged business enterprises with participation goals. And the following goals that you see here on the slide are the goals the project has set for itself to carry out that work. We believe we're on course to reach those. Next slide, please. Disadvantaged business enterprises, or DBEs, they include small businesses that are at least 51% owned by minorities, defined as persons who are who identify as Black, Hispanic, Native American, Indigenous, or Asian Pacific Island Americans and subcontinent Asian Americans, and women and other individuals on a case-by-case basis. We began awarding DBEs pre-construction contracts in this past July, and here's a quote from the president of one of those DBEs and what that award meant for his business. Next slide, please. So another value on this project is community input and transparent decision-making. And to that end, we have 2 advisory committees that help us adhere to the values of the project. The HAB, if you may have heard me mention, is the Historic Albina Advisory Board. It's a committee assembled to elevate voices of and input from the Black community to ensure that project outcomes reflect community interests and values, and that Historic Albina directly benefits from the investments of this project. And the COAC, the Community Oversight Advisory Committee, works to ensure the project's construction contractor meets its community and project goals and expectations for contracting with disadvantaged businesses and employing minorities and women. And the COAC brings a broad perspective on community, social, economic, and workforce issues in the project area. A recent intergovernmental agreement led by Governor Kate Brown was signed by the city and key project partners, and the agreement created a framework for all parties to work together on the project and to hold ODOT and the project accountable to meeting commitments as made to the community and to working in a transparent and accountable way. Here we are kind of tabling at events, and we've done a fair amount of that throughout this past summer, being out in the community, hearing from the community on through some design surveys we had that talk about elements of that are able to kind of take input from the community, particularly the historic albina community, to inform recognition of historic albina in the project area in the proposed design. Next slide, please. You can see some of those proposed patterns that the community was discussing and voting on there in the surveys. On the right-hand side, some tile patterns. And we also were able to kind of bring the design surveys as well as some design workshops to youth. Here's one of those at Camp Also last spring, where youth were able to learn about urban design and planning and how to kind of do talking about large infrastructure projects like the Rose Quarter and how it would impact their community. So with the next value here, we have mobility focus, and mobility focus means the project design increases the ability for people to access a variety of modes of transportation that serve all needs and that get people to where they want to go quickly, safely, and efficiently. This project will save drivers nearly 2.5 million hours of travel time annually, see a reduction in crashes by 5 up to 50%, create more opportunities for walking, biking, and rolling as an alternative to driving, connect to the Green Loop, which we can share a little bit about more later, shaping up as we re-engage with the city, and a highway cover that will create a more walkable neighborhood. One of the key features to improve safety and decrease congestion on this project design is, or a proposed project design, is auxiliary lanes. And we'd like to show you just a quick short video here about how those function and how they'll work to reduce congestion and reduce and improve safety.
Hey, Portland. We love our town, but getting to where you need to go, like getting to work or getting to school, there's room for improvement. Getting you where you need to go safely and efficiently is the key motivation behind the I-5 Rose Quarter Improvement Project. Oregon and Portland are growing, and as we grow, we need to anticipate how that growth will affect statewide and regional traffic and create durable solutions for those challenges. One of those solutions is the use of auxiliary lanes. Auxiliary lanes are used throughout the U.S. and allow us to use the highway space more efficiently, while also reducing traffic delays and merging conflicts and improving safety and traffic flow. Auxiliary lanes are ramp-to-ramp connections. They allow drivers to make connections on the freeway without increasing congestion and merging delays. Auxiliary lanes are a simple, efficient solution to improve traffic in place of large-scale highway widenings. Where 3 major interstates converge, congestion is a daily and growing headache. Merging traffic is currently a major contributor to congestion in the project area at the state's top bottleneck. Once the project is complete, an estimated 1/3 of the drivers traveling on I-5 within the project area can use auxiliary lanes without needing to merge with through traffic. Less merging, fewer crashes, and less stress. We know we can't build or widen our way out of congestion, but we can make our existing infrastructure better. Auxiliary lanes are one tool to address safety and operations out of a large set of sustainable and comprehensive transportation solutions in ODOT's urban mobility strategy, such as reducing bottlenecks, safety enhancements, public transportation and multimodal improvements, along with congestion pricing in the Portland metro area. This is how we move forward together to get you where you need to be, safely and efficiently.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. So we know that greenhouse, sorry, I should call out the next value here. Climate and action improve public health is the final 4th guiding value on this project. And we know that greenhouse gas emissions accelerate climate change. In Oregon, greenhouse gases from transportation make up approximately 40% of our total state greenhouse gas emissions. ODOT's climate policy is in alignment with state and city goals as laid out in ODOT's strategic action plan. And its climate office was formed in 2021 to ensure those goals are met for the agency. We're early in the work on this, but diligently working to meet those goals. Reducing congestion, especially like on projects with the Rose, like the Rose Quarter project, will result in less idling and lower emissions. And recently, ODOT also announced it's making a $100 million investment in EV infrastructure. By improving connectivity on local streets for people walking, biking, and rolling on the project, it'll be easier for people to travel without relying on a car, and increasing the number of people who feel safe walking, biking, and rolling means fewer greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. Okay, I am actually going to turn it over to a colleague of mine, August Chesser, who's going to share about the project design and benefits.
Hi, my name is August Chesser. I'm a roadway engineer with ODOT. Go to the next slide. I'm getting over a cold, so I apologize if the voice sounds a little weird, but yeah, so this slide, we see we've got 6 major improvements that we're considering. The main one here is number 1, the cover. If you're out there on foot, walking through this area, it's not pleasant. You're standing above the highway. The sidewalks are pretty narrow, and in some places the connections aren't there at all. So adding this cover, we're expecting to just have it feel more like a neighborhood in that area. Number 2 is this Hancock crossing. This is one of the new connections that we're creating to try to restore the original street grid that existed before the highways built. Number 3 is just a variety of multimodal local street improvements. So things like wider sidewalks, improved ADA ramps, getting utility boxes out of the walking pathways, raised bicycle lanes, and bike signals where possible. Number 4 is this green loop connection. So in previous designs, and the green loop is a city project, so we're ODOT, we don't have exact say about where it goes, but there was an original element in the original design that had a raised over crossing on I-5 south of Weidler. But with the new, I'm sure you've heard of the Hybrid 3, this new design that's more community input driven. We moved this ramp, number 6, into the area where the original crossing was going to be. So now the assumed green loop locations on the Broadway Weidler couplet. Number 5 is auxiliary lanes and shoulders. So we're adding auxiliary lanes and improving the existing shoulders, which are inconsistent and narrower than standard. So the idea here is that the auxiliary lanes are going to decrease. I mean, just watch the video, so maybe we can skip that part. Number 6 is the off-ramp relocation. So currently it drops in at Vancouver and Broadway. And so we're pulling that thing down underneath the cover, and then it pops out down south at the Williams, Wheeler, Winning, Ramsey intersection. One of the cool things that we're doing with this project is a CMGC process. If you're not familiar with that, it stands for Construction Manager General Contractor. This is in contrast to our normal ODOT typical project delivery, which is a design bid build, where we design the project, we put it out to bid, pick the lowest bidder, and then build it. With the CMGC process, the construction company is already on board, so we know who we're working with. They're able to provide input all the way through the design process. We can kind of sidestep a lot of the common issues that come up with the design bid build, where you're not building a relationship with your builders until you're already done with the design. So we're able to make adjustments and improvements throughout the process. Next slide. So there's another other benefits. I think the video said we're the top state bottleneck. It's also the 28th worst in the nation. Reducing the weaving intensity is going to allow us to have more efficient freight movement, supply chain connections. We're rebuilding huge portions of the neighborhood, so we're going to be able to trigger developments and improvements to the local system. And that comes with long-term career prospects for people in the construction industry, and we're really focused on building disadvantaged business enterprise opportunities. And I guess by this estimation, they're saying that we're going to reduce 2.5 million hours of travel time by reducing the complexity of the movements coming through the area. Next slide. All right, so this one is our project timeline. We've split the project into 4 different packages. Early package A, B, and C are stuff that we're coming close to having a completed design, and we're able to start construction in some cases next year, late next year, as you can see from the schedule down below. And the main construction package is all the exciting stuff in the middle, the cover, the mainline improvements, and all that. And so that's a little bit less far along in the design process, and so we're having that begin construction in 2026. Currently in design. Next slide.
I can take
this
it.
Is a new one on me.
I can take it for here. Thank
Thanks.
you, August. Yeah, as August mentioned, we are still in about 5 to 10% design for that main construction package. So there's still a lot of design refinements to be had on the horizon, especially as we re-engage with the city and work with them to make sure we're aligning with them on this work. Here's the supplemental environmental assessment. I mentioned earlier that we are in for the project is in a public comment period. And I would like to share a little bit about how we got to the supplemental environment assessment period we are in now. In early 2019, ODOT and FHWA published the original EA, followed by a public comment period and lots of public engagement, including a variety of presentations to various city committees. And the EA evaluated a design that included 2 separate highway covers, as I mentioned earlier. In 2020, ODOT and FHWA published a revised EA and finding of no significant impact in November of 2020. And Oregon Transportation Commission directed ODOT to commission 2 independent reviews, including the independent cover assessment, which through working with the community and community stakeholders ultimately led to the proposed hybrid 3 cover concept design. So ODOT compared the recommended ICA hybrid 3 design changes to the design in the 2019 EA because the changes involved impacts not considered at the time of the original FONSI design. FHWA rescinded the FONSI in 2021 and ODOT began preparing the supplemental EA. That's all to say, I feel like summing this up might be an easier way to understand this. It's the original design was considered, didn't meet the community standards for community opportunities for development. We were sent to the drawing board by the Oregon Transportation Commission. We did come up with a hybrid 3 cover concept through the ICA process, which was an independently led process working with groups like the Albina Vision Trust and other community groups and the city. And ODOT compared this new design, decided hybrid 3 was the way to go, and then decided that there was enough significant change in design to withdraw its finding of no significance and go into a new phase, which would reevaluate the project with a supplemental environmental assessment. So not a full environmental assessment, but assessing the changes in the design with the hybrid 3 cover. So the supplemental EA updates information that was presented in the 2019 EA. It describes why the project has been proposed, what changes have been made, and what the potential environmental benefits and impacts of the design are. The supplemental EA examines topics like noise impacts, multimodal transportation system impacts and benefits, historic resources, environmental justice, et cetera. There are quite a few topics, and we'll be sharing out the online open house for this supplemental environmental assessment comment period, where you can learn about all of these topics and the findings in the supplemental environmental assessment. So here we are, as I mentioned, in the public comment period. These are the opportunities for comment, and we welcome everyone here tonight to go to our online open house. The virtual public hearing will be held on December 14th. I believe, Teresa, will be sending out this presentation in PDF, is that correct, to this group, so they can click on these links then, but I'll also work on getting them into the chat here, so folks can click and link out as well. If you are wanting to know any of this information as well, it's on our project website, which is i5rosequarter.org. This is a critical part of the environmental review process. We would really love as many people as possible to participate. It's an opportunity to share comments, your comments on the findings. And once we have everyone's findings in by January 4th, when the comment period ends after 50 days, we will be anticipating a decision from the FHWA in early 2023 or late spring. All right, so again, the supplemental EA public comment period will end in January, spring 2023. The decision document is anticipated, and then the finalization of early work package designs that August showed you in that timeline earlier will be starting to wrap up. Again, not the main construction package, just the early work packages there. Next slide, please. So if you know of other organizations, this is our engagement team, by the way, out in front of our project office. If you'd like to request a briefing, our team will be happy to present one to any other groups that you may have in mind. Please sign up for our newsletter at our website under our contact page. You can keep posted on social media by following us on ODOT. ODOT posts the project's announcements there. And yeah, we look forward to, and I think next slide is just saying thank you. Yes, all right, great. Also has our website, an email and phone. That again, thank you so much for being here tonight. We look forward to your questions here. I'll give you the answers that we can. And if we don't get to all of them tonight, we will follow up if we can offline. We're always happy to kind of get back via email with ones we miss. And again, I apologize for not being on screen. I'm just having some tech issues tonight, but I'll turn it back over to Machu to facilitate what comes next.
Well, thank you so much, Rose and August, for coming out tonight and presenting this timely update on the SEA and the I-5 Rose Corridor project. I see a question from the audience, so let's go to it. Sarah.
Hi, thanks for that helpful update. Sarah Iannarone, she, her pronouns. I'm a resident of the Mount Scott Arleta neighborhood. I have two questions. Is it possible to reconnect the Albina neighborhood without widening the freeway below the caps? Is that technically possible? And then also, I noticed that you said that the state was 20th in congestion in the US, in part due to this I-5 corridor. And I wanted to know if you knew, yesterday being World Day of Remembrance for traffic victims of traffic violence, Oregon right now is 10th in the US for traffic fatalities per capita. And in 2021, over half of the city of Portland's fatalities happened on ODOT-controlled orphan highways and other facilities. So can you tell me the number of fatalities that happened in this stretch of I-5? Thank you very much.
So to answer your first question of how could we connect the Albina community without widening the freeway. This is a safety improvement and a project to address congestion in this area. So first and foremost, it was designed and mandated by House Bill 2017 to do that, just that. However, in being responsive to the community alongside the independent cover assessments results, reconnecting albino was a priority. So creating the highway cover is really the kind of second tier to this project, if you will, that comes along with the highway improvement. So they kind of go part and parcel with the hybrid 3 cover concept. In terms of safety and the SPIS sites that I mentioned earlier, the reporting system for that does not distinguish fatalities from crashes. Though, and I personally cannot tell you how many deaths have happened in this project area. Any death, of course, would be highly regrettable. I don't know what the exact numbers are. And so I think it would be something we can look into in terms of specifics, but I'm not even sure on the SPIS rating report that they make that fully transparent or public as to to how many fatalities occur within the amount of crashes. So I know that a high amount of crashes happen. I can't tell you how many of those are fatalities. I guess Sarah is my answer there, but it would take some further digging. I know we've looked fairly deeply into that and haven't been able to get an answer ourselves, but it doesn't mean it's not out there. So I might be able to come back to you with that.
So just to clarify, you're saying that it is or isn't possible to construct the caps without the freeway widening, and 2, you don't know how many fatalities have happened on this roadway, like last year or in the last 10 years? Just to clarify the answer there.
I'm saying we know how many crashes have occurred. The data that is reported doesn't make it clear how many of those are fatalities. And August, feel free to jump in if you know differently.
Yeah, I've got a little bit of data. I know there's been at least one fatal in the last 10 years. There was a pedestrian involved. It was up on the 405 interchange ramp. I don't, the crash data when we get it doesn't have enough data to really know what was going on there. But like Rose said, this is a high frequency of crashes. We know that any crash, even the minor ones, can be life-changing if it happens in just the wrong way. So the idea here is to reduce the high frequency of crashes.
Well, thank you. I want to do a time check. The next presentation is queued at 7:50. Doug, can you provide a quick question or comment?
Yeah, I've heard years ago that there were in fact 0 deaths, and these were all sideswipe crashes except for the one that weren't just pedestrians on the roadway. Plenty of that is information has now seemed to have gone away. I am concerned that any new construction around a highway off-ramp triggers engineering standards that make them make any intersections more dangerous for pedestrians by building 40-foot radius corners, so cars go roaring around there and hit people trying to cross the street, even with a green signal, with advanced timing, etc. So really, the old plans and probably these new plans too change from like 15-foot radius corners that pedestrians are fairly safe at to 20, 30, or 40-foot radius corners that they'll make the whole area more dangerous for pedestrians just by virtue of it having to meet ODOT standard. Now, trucks can make those sharper turns. They just have to go into another lane and come back, and they do that now at, say, Weidler and Vancouver. They turn around a 5-foot, 10-foot radius corner there, but no, ODOT's going to do 40-foot radius corners, and they'll be much more dangerous. And I could go on, but I'll just leave it at those 2 points. Thank you.
Hey, Teresa, in the I-5 Rose Quarter project, can I email you some of the comments and questions for like follow-up and just keep us on schedule? My apologies, Josh. So if you want to put any questions in the chat, I'll make sure to get to the team so they can answer the questions.
That would be great. And we'll follow up.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for coming out tonight. Really appreciate the update, particularly at this point in the public comment process. And so have a good evening. And again, I appreciate so much your time tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So without further ado, we now have Lower Southeast Rising Area Plan, and we are joined by Bill Cunningham and Bryan Poole. So if you want to take away, Bill, I'll give you sharing ability.
All right, and actually, I believe that Bryan Poole, my co-project manager from PBOT, will be sharing his presentation. But both Bryan and I are glad to be back with Southeast Uplift to provide an update on the Southeast Rising Area Plan. And with that, I think I'll hand it off to Bryan. Actually, one note, until recently, Marty Stockton was leading the planning side of this effort, and she had an amazing opportunity with the Parks Bureau and has left us. So I am filling Marty's capable shoes in this project, but I'll be looking forward to hearing people's thoughts after we share our update. Bryan.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. Good evening, everyone. It's good to see a lot of familiar names and faces tonight. And happy to provide a quick update about where we're at in this planning process. So we're just going to give a quick summary of the project and goals for those that might not have heard about this project or been as involved. Talk a little bit about what we've heard from the public this year, and then get right into some of our proposed land use and transportation changes and priorities. So the really core focus of this plan is on the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood, but we do have a sort of expanded boundaries just to think about connectivity in sort of within the surrounding neighborhoods. So you'll see sort of that core focus of Brentwood-Darlington throughout our conversation, but there are sort of porous boundaries. And the goal of our plan has been to develop some strategies and potential zoning changes that would increase livability and housing stability, provide more housing options, and also provide improved access to employment, schools, other sort of services and amenities in the area. We've been working on this plan for about almost 2 years now. So we're coming up to the point where we're finalizing prioritization and implementation strategies, and are going to be quickly moving into a first draft of the plan. And so we're excited to sort of share where we're at with our recommendations this evening. Just to give a quick update about the open house that we had in the summer, we got about a little over 500 responses, which was great. A lot of responses were from residents in Brentwood-Darlington. Did other activities as well, bike rides, community walks, tabling events, and we shared the potential land use changes or community development scenarios, as well as some different transportation corridors and potential projects to get feedback on some of those issues, which I'll share in the next few pages. So we first shared 4 different community development scenarios, and they're sort of going in sequential order in terms of the level of density, proposed density that would be occurring or allowed with each of these scenarios. So scenario 1 is essentially that would be the status quo, or sort of what those existing sort of zoning is now. And then we moved to have more sort of enhanced intersections, like about sort of with focusing really just on key intersections and providing some commercial opportunities there. And then sort of growing a little bit further with corridors in scenario 3, having sort of growth and development along the corridors, and then more of a centers in corridors approach, which we'll get more into is that scenario 4. So we just wanted to give a little bit of context with that, and also ask for some feedback on prioritization of these more major and local streets in the project area, and thinking about bicycle connectivity, potential changes to the bus network. Those were also things we asked about. And you can see here, in terms of what we heard, again, almost everyone was from the project area, 91%, which is great. And on the left, we had people rank land use priorities. So what was their number one sort of choice, and overwhelmingly adding more, or I'd say mostly it was adding more commercial opportunities, and then closely behind that, adding more affordable housing. So those were the top two choices in terms of overall land use priorities. For transportation priorities, making improvements to sort of pedestrian environment and being able to walk easier was number one, and then followed sort of a bit lower here was street improvements and adding bicycle or scooter improvements, which we fleshed out a little bit more in other questions you'll see. But for the we also asked what was the most appropriate development scenario of those four options that we shared, and fairly overwhelmingly we got responses back saying they supported scenario 4. So that highest level of growth and development scenario had the most support, followed by the second most, scenario 3. And then on the flip side, we asked the question of what you felt would create most burdens or negatively impact the neighborhood. And scenario 1, so the do nothing scenario, was the one that we heard feedback would be the most negative. So that was fairly telling for our project team. And which was somewhat nice was that a lot of that development that we were proposing was on 52nd and 72nd as sort of our key focus areas. And when we asked what the most important major corridors to improve would be, the feedback we got was 72nd and 52nd being the top two, followed closely by Woodstock, which is a corridor, but has significant gaps in terms of crossing spacing and safe bike facilities. And so that was fairly telling in terms of sort of matching the land use and the transportation improvements that are needed there. So those are just some really quick highlights of some of the public engagement and feedback we got. We also did some supplemental outreach. So I mentioned the community walks and tabling we did. We also partnered with Latino Network to do some focus groups with parents of school-age children where English is the second language, to get feedback on issues or needs, and also to have them fill out the survey. And so we got some good feedback from them, largely similar in terms of the development scenario and the corridors they wanted to see improved, but also had some sort of more anecdotal feedback that we were able to dig in a little bit more on. So that's just a quick snapshot. We're going to move through a lot of content here. So just to warn you, we weren't sure what the sort of interest was going to be in terms of each of these things, and there's a lot to cover. So we'll do sort of a whirlwind approach, and then happy to sort of go back and dig into anything else that you're interested in or have further questions about. But wanted to just highlight that we do have a summary document that shows more of those that feedback, and we can share out these slides, or you can just type in Lower Southeast Rising plan, go to their website, and it's in the documents section there. So Bill, I'll turn it over now to you, and just let me know when you want me to advance.
All right. One thing that'd be useful for me is to know where people are from. I know that Stephenie Frederick is here from Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood, and that Sarah is from Mount Scott, Arleta. Are there other people from the study area? So including Brentwood-Darlington, Woodstock, Mount Scott, and Lents? Maybe not a lot, but definitely chime in if you have questions about specific areas. But as Bryan was mentioning, we ended up with a preferred community development scenario, focusing growth in the centers and corridors. And what staff is doing now is taking the preferred concept that came from all that community input and looking at how the zoning could implement that concept. And actually, next slide, Bryan. back one, there we are. And just to highlight some of the main aspects of that preferred concept. Oh, Deb, great to have you here from Brentwood-Darlington. I should mention that we had more input from Brentwood-Darlington out of the 500 plus people who completed the survey than any other neighborhood. I think more than any other neighborhood combined, which makes sense. But probably the key component that's changed from what's there now was looking at a new neighborhood center in the vicinity of Favell and 72nd, and I have it highlighted in gold and orange. And what really interested people here was not just growth for growth's sake, is really more the idea of creating a hub for the community, a place for commercial and community services where there aren't a lot currently. But some of the other components also had things from the other scenarios, like strengthening some of the smaller commercial nodes at the major intersections like 52nd and Duke and 52nd and Favell. But also knowing that housing cost is an issue, people did like the idea of expanding housing opportunities on the major corridors, so 52nd, 72nd, and Woodstock. And that would involve some changes in zoning to support more multifamily zoning in those areas. And I should mention that most of what we're looking at was really focused on those corridors and that center. The majority of the neighborhood really wasn't a focus of the discussion. And you'll see that as we start going into the details of zoning. And one thing to mention too, the transportation ideas are part of this, but I won't be sharing that. So if you have questions that come up related to the land use approach and how it relates to transportation, they'll definitely be coming up when Bryan presents. Next, please. And just a little bit of background. We have designated centers and neighborhood centers in various places in the city, and it's really intended to reinforce and support the role of some of our business districts as places that are hubs for community and where we want to expand opportunities for housing. And in this area, the existing designated centers include the Woodstock Main Street area, Heart of Foster, and then Lents. And this diagram is showing about a half-mile radius from the core of each one of those areas. And as you can see, there's a large chunk of the area, especially in Brentwood-Darlington, that is not within a half-mile walking distance of those centers. So that's really one issue that's been at the forefront of a lot of our discussion. How do you increase access to services in that area? Next, please. And the idea of a neighborhood center around 72nd and Favell would help fill in the gap in that area. And that's something that's definitely part of what we're looking at in terms of zoning. How do we support the idea of a neighborhood hub or center in that location? Next, please. And some other context, the vast majority of zoning in this area is currently single dwelling. It's the yellow and orange here. It's almost 75%. Much smaller amounts of other types of zoning in that area. Just 10% is multi-dwelling in the blue there. Next, please. In community conversations, we shared diagrams showing the kinds of zones that we're considering for expanded mapping of in this area. And I know a lot of you are kind of pros in this or are familiar with our zoning. But just as a reminder, in our multi-dwelling zones, the RM1 zone is a small scale zone, typically 2 to 3 stories. It's really intended to fit into the fabric of established neighborhoods. And then the RM2 zone is more of a 3 to 4 story multi-dwelling zone, typically 3 to 4 stories, very often along our transit corridors or in our centers. And then for our commercial mixed use zones, the smallest is CR. It's basically a corner retail type zone, usually scattered sites in the middle of often single family neighborhoods. And then CM1 is a typically 2 to 3 story scale along some of our more secondary corridors or outside of our key center areas. And then CM2 is more of a mid-scale mixed use zone, 3 to 4 story zone. And that's really the most common type of zone we have in our centers and our major corridors. And I'll have to apologize in advance. My voice may be breaking and I may be coughing occasionally, but thankfully I'm not in the same room as you. Just a basic thing to keep in mind is the smaller the number, typically the smaller the zone. So RM1 is small, RM2 is bigger. Same thing with CM1 and CM2. And next, please. The general concepts here are, following from some of the scenarios, is some upzoning to more of a medium scale at some of those major nodes. And I'll get into this more later. And next, please. And then upzoning to multifamily zoning along some of the major corridors. And the biggest change is really to 72nd south of Woodstock, where it's existing single dwelling zoning and would be going to the small scale multi-dwelling zoning. And potentially some upzoning along Woodstock between 72nd and 82nd to a larger scale multi-dwelling zone. And I'll touch on that a little bit later as well. Next, please. But really the area, the biggest change would be that potential neighborhood center circled over here. And they're both increases in the the mixed use zones to create more of a small Main Street area along 72nd south of Faville, as well as some expansion of multi-dwelling zoning to allow more people to be close to those services and to support those businesses. Next, please. And I wanted to just drill down a little bit about the western end of this neighborhood center. And we sometimes just call it the Brentwood-Darlington neighborhood center, but I don't think there's consensus yet as to what it could be called. But there's an existing commercial core around a grocery outlet at the intersection of 72nd and Faville. And the idea here is to strengthen that as the core commercial area and upzone it to CM2 zoning. So to a 3 to 4 story scale to really anchor that neighborhood center. And then to expand the commercial zoning southward along 72nd. And this would be a major change because that's residential zoning currently. So this would be applying a commercial mixed use zone, but keeping it to the small scale CM1 to the south along 72nd. And then this part of the concept in terms of really fostering it as a mixed use district is upzoning some from the single dwelling townhouse zone, the R2.5 zone in orange there, to RM2 and RM1 near the commercial core. Next, please. And an area that's of some focus, actually, I guess I was speaking too soon. This gets into the detail of that western end, but I won't talk about that anymore since we had already discussed it some. Let's go to the next slide. One of the bigger issues or questions is more towards the eastern end of this potential neighborhood center over to where Faville intersects with 82nd. Part of this would be looking at upzoning from the townhouse R2.5 zone to RM1 multi-dwelling zoning. Yet it's still keeping it to a pretty low rise residential scale around Malden. But the big question mark is what's happening on 82nd. And in our community conversations so far, people like the idea of that becoming in a mixed use node for the community. Right now, the zoning is employment, EG1, which allows employment, but it also allows drive-through uses and self-service storage uses. And there's some community concern about encouraging that as a pattern in that area. There's a lot of interest in going to a commercial mixed-use zone along 82nd by Faville there to really cultivate it as something that could better serve the neighborhood. Also, for those who know the area on 83rd, there are a number of small lots just north of Faville. Those are all residential lots. Right now, residential is a prohibited use in the employment zone. So just something to be aware of. Let's see, next. On 72nd, again, the big change there between Faville and Woodstock would be going from single dwelling to at least low rise and multi-dwelling zoning. And that's really intended to implement the community's interest in a predominantly single family area, allowing some more multi-dwelling options, especially on the major corridors. Part of the concept too would affect areas outside of Brentwood-Darlington. Along Woodstock, at the intersection of 72nd at the triangle there. There's some comp plan designation of commercial mixed use that does not currently have that zoning. And we're looking at just going ahead and rezoning some smaller chunks of property to CM2 to support 72nd and Woodstock, really becoming more of an important mixed use and community node for that area. And knowing how the triangle is really helping us spur that identity. Also, looking towards the east, towards 82nd, we already have the low-rise RM1 zoning, also at the western end of the Lents Town Center. And we're looking at the possibility of increasing the multifamily housing opportunities there to allow the RM2 more medium scale multi-dwelling zone. Let's see, next, please. Changes in 52nd itself is a lot more of a hodgepodge of zoning. It's got single family, it's got multi-dwelling, and it's got mixed use. And the zoning pattern we're looking at here would basically rezone the remaining multi-dwelling zoning largely to the low-rise RM1 zone. And then at some of the more major nodes, such as at Duke and at Faville, upzoning from the low-rise CM1 to CM2 to really, again, strengthen the commercial anchors in those areas. And then some also upzoning from the low-rise RM1 to RM2 at those major intersections. And yeah, this is a lot of information to process. So I'll be happy to actually take questions Machu has later that come up. And let's see, what was the next slide, please? Just some just give you a heads up as to what we're doing. We're doing an economic analysis of potential zone changes on displacement. We're identifying where some of the existing low-cost apartments are, with the idea that we would avoid any upzoning to the larger scale zones to really reduce redevelopment pressures, or at least not increase redevelopment pressures on existing low-cost apartments. And we're also looking at infrastructure constraints there, and are going to be doing some more targeted outreach to underrepresented communities. And we'll be talking more to neighborhood associations and the 82nd Avenue Business Association. And just so you're aware, our broader discussion or sharing of these concepts is going to be happening when the discussion draft is out, probably in February or March. And I should highlight what we have now is not actually a formal proposal. I'd characterize it more as just a zoning concept that we're exploring at the moment. Any questions before we head on to transportation?
Yeah, maybe Bill, maybe I'll just run through, because I can try to get through in about 5 minutes. Now we'll give us 10 minutes or so for questions before. I don't want to make my 82nd Avenue friends stay too late tonight, so we'll try to get them ready at 8:30. But yeah, just wanted to kind of give a quick overview and think through. So the great thing about this plan, which we didn't say at the beginning, was that it's a great opportunity for BPS and PBOT to work together on thinking holistically about land use and transportation changes and how they complement one another. So I'll be talking a little bit about the prioritization work that we've been doing, and then also talking about some of the proposed TriMet changes that we've been working with them on before we move into next steps. But I'll go through these fairly quickly. We can go back and get into details if it's a desire, but we have narrowed down the group of projects from that open house to 14 potential neighborhood greenways, 15 sort of more busy major corridor improvements, and then these local street improvements, some of which are on corridors, some of which are sort of more traffic calming areas. And I'll get a little bit more into each of those. But right now we're in the process of prioritizing and narrowing those projects into tiers. So those top tier projects will typically be the ones that we do develop more in terms of refinement, cost estimation, and then sort of apply them to funding opportunities. Whereas the other tier projects would go into our transportation system plan or other sort of project lists, but wouldn't be typically on our sort of front burner. And again, sort of thinking firstly, breaking these out into the different categories. These are the corridor improvements that we have been discussing. And you can see fairly easily how it aligns with the land use changes that we're proposing in terms of 52nd, 72nd, Woodstock. And we've narrowed those down into sort of chunks of different corridors where there's natural breaks. But the idea being that we would want to reduce speed and make it easier to walk, bike, cross these streets in the future. And so we developed these prioritization factors. Again, a lot of these factors in our prioritization were focused on serving Brentwood-Darlington as the focus of the plan, but also thinking about the land use changes that are coming, thinking about safety issues where we're having crashes, and also hearing what we heard in terms of the open house and public, and then the overall cost. And so we've narrowed it down. So the solid lines here are the tier 1 projects, again, sort of focused on Woodstock, 52nd, 72nd, Duke, Flavel. We do have Herald and Steele up there to the north a little bit, and then just filling a gap on 46th. So you can see those are the sort of our proposed tier 1 projects for the busier streets. Some need more work than others. Some are more just sort of filling crossing gaps. Others would be more substantial in terms of infrastructure and signal intersections, like on Woodstock, would require a little bit more investment. For the neighborhood greenways, we had this list of projects. It's a pretty robust list, especially when you can see some of these green lines actually are funded but not yet existing, and so just wanted to flag that you might see this on like on Napnogden and say that's not a bikeway. It's coming, but these other neighborhood greenways are intended to sort of complement what's existing or funded. And again, our prioritization factors was focused on first the core of Brentwood-Darlington, but also connectivity and spacing. And so we have focused on sort of this these segments, really Tolman, 60th being critical, also filling in some of these other gaps, crossing 82nd over on Lambert and Harney. And then also to the north, this sort of Steele Mitchell, which would connect some Mercado and Foster over to propose bike lanes on Steele. Just sort of noting that there is a section here where there's a lot of unpaved streets. So Tolman, this section of Tolman would be on a gravel street. It would require more cost if we were going to pave that, but there is a benefit for sort of providing accessibility for all users, ADA accessibility, in terms of what that could look like. I can explain that more if folks are interested. But this neighborhood greenways, these are just sort of showing the half-mile coverage gap coverage for those greenways. And so it shows if we include 52nd and we're proposing upgrading the bike facility on 52nd, this would provide fairly good north-south and east-west coverage in the area with these tier 1 projects for the bike facilities. And then on the local street improvements, we had these potential streets for paving where there's sort of a lot of gaps in connectivity. But we are thinking, we're trying to sort of consider how we implement these. A lot of these are sort of traffic calming zones. And so we might just be thinking about monitoring these areas and sort of getting these more programmatically funded. And then also looking at different potential funding options for how to improve some of these gravel streets that are having sort of some critical issues. So all that to say, these aren't really prioritized or in the same way, but are on the project team's radar for how we can make improvements to these areas. And so our next step with these is I mentioned we've developed these tiers, and then we'll be developing those into some more detailed projects, sort of corridor booklet type, where the crossings might be, what type of improvements going to be coming, and start to do cost estimates for those. And so along with that though, and I think my colleague Zef Wagner is here as well, you can jump in, but we also have been looking at transit improvements in this plan. And so we hired Jarrett Walker and Associates to a consultant to do some analysis on transit. But that was right before TriMet started doing their work on this new Forward Together plan. And so we've been able to work really closely with them on thinking about how transit might change sort of within Brentwood-Darlington, but also within the sort of broader lower Southeast area. And so that's been sort of a great opportunity for us to sort of collaborate on changes there. So Zef, I see you jumped on. You wanna take over here? Talk about the Forward Together plan?
So the big things that we had identified in our outreach and our analysis was the need to better serve Flavel Street and Woodstock Street because these are, Woodstock has high density zoning and doesn't have any bus service east of 52nd Avenue currently. So that was a big issue we identified. We also identified that we'd like there to be service from this new 72nd and Flavel neighborhood center, direct access to the Flavel Max station on 92nd and Flavel, which currently has no bus line that does that. We also heard we've heard for a long time from the community. I mean, dating back to there was a MERP project that looked at the neighborhood. There was, even before that, we were hearing the need for bus service north-south on 72nd Avenue, which we're proposing as a neighborhood corridor. And so we'd like to serve that with transit as well. So we kind of proposed all three of those things, and TriMet came up with this proposal here, which takes what's currently the line 19 on Woodstock, and they're going to interline it with the number 4 in North Portland. So that's why it shows as number 4. But basically it's the current line 19. And rather than stair stepping its way through the neighborhood down Duke, 82nd and Flavel, it would just stay on Woodstock to Lents. And it would also be a frequent service line for the first time. So this will be a huge upgrade for the neighborhood. And it's just a more direct and intuitive way to travel. You know, if you're on Woodstock and 52nd, you want to get to Woodstock and 92nd, just take a bus straight down Woodstock. They're also proposing the line 71 becomes frequent and keeps its current routing, which is also a huge increase in service to the neighborhood, having that line be every 15 minutes, all day, every day. And then they're proposing to reroute the line 10. Instead of going on Herald, the line 10 would cut down on 52nd to Duke, then to 72nd, then down to Flavel, then to the Max station. So that was their way of trying to address our desire for a direct connection from 72nd and Flavel to the Max station. Although it does create this stair-step pattern, and we noticed that it creates a bit of a duplicative service where 52nd and Woodstock kind of have two bus lines that go to the same place. So we wanted to do some thinking about whether that was the best route option. So we, really the thing that we saw lacking in the Duke option, the big thing that we saw lacking was not having enough service on 72nd Avenue. We had heard a lot from Brentwood-Darlington folks that they want to be able to travel north and south, and there's this big gap in north-south service. So by keeping the bus on Herald in the option on the right, this is showing with the land use changes. So here you can see that if it stayed on Herald to 72nd and then went down, it would connect the kind of Heart of Foster Center that we're expanding south to Woodstock. And that includes the Mercado, it includes the Mount Scott Community Center, really major destinations, and also a lot of dense land uses. This would provide a bus line that would connect from all of that stuff straight down 72nd to the 72nd Flavel area with the grocery outlet and planned increased land use right there. And then it would go east to the Max station. And so this would be a way to better connect neighborhoods to neighborhoods, which we really think that transit is best suited for. People generally don't ride transit for very short trips within the neighborhood. Usually you're riding the bus to get from your neighborhood to other neighborhoods to access destinations. And so we had Jarrett Walker do some analysis of these two options to sort of compare them. And we basically created these travel time maps. So this is how far you can get in 30 minutes from each of the neighborhood centers. So from 72nd and Herald, which is right at the Mount Scott Community Center, it really increases access to the southern part of Brentwood-Darlington. You'll see there in blue to the Max station at 92nd and Flavel, and also to the Reed neighborhood. In comparison, the Duke option doesn't really add more coverage significantly. And then the next one is if you were at the grocery outlet to catch the bus, you this shows how you would have expanded service up to the Foster area, and more jobs and residents reachable. There's a little table there in the lower left on each of these slides. And then the next one I think was from the Woodstock Main Street. This is to demonstrate that if you're at the Woodstock Main Street, it actually doesn't matter whether it goes on Duke or Flavel, or Duke or Herald, because they end up in the same place anyway. And so from Woodstock, it's kind of ambivalent between the two.
Okay, thanks, Zef.
Yeah, so we feel like that's a better solution, and we've gotten good feedback from parks and from a lot of neighbors and things like that. So we're hoping to give that as feedback to TriMet and influence their plan, and then also come up with some longer range ideas for the neighborhood if service was to increase, because this is a financially constrained plan that TriMet's doing, where they're just reallocating service. They don't have more service to offer.
Thanks, Zef. I know we're short on time, so I just wanted to say that for next steps, we are sort of pulling these things into a draft plan. So the next sort of time for substantial engagement will be when that's released in sort of spring of 2023. But definitely want to answer any questions we have in the time remaining. If there's anything we can clarify, happy to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bryan and Bill and Zef. If there are any questions, we can entertain it right now. The next item's at 8:30, so we have a minute.
I have a minute.
I have a question about the transit Duke alignments. Is there any complementary land use changes being considered depending on where that transit route ultimately lands?
We weren't looking at land use changes to either Herald or Duke for the most part. It's really focused on 52nd and 72nd.
Yeah, so Herald and Duke are very similar in their zoning and their land use. They're both mainly single family detached homes, and they're zoned that way. And we don't expect a lot of density on either one. So this is really about where are you, which way do you take to get to 72nd Avenue? And so our goal with this Herald option was to serve as much of 72nd Avenue as possible. We did explore an option early on to have a continuous bus line on 72nd, like a brand new bus line. And TriMet said that they would not be willing to do that. Because 72nd Avenue is so short, it doesn't really have good anchor points north and south. So we kind of had to figure out an east-west bus line that could use 72nd for a portion.
Cool. Thanks, Zef and Bryan and Bill. Sorry, Sarah, question.
Yeah, it's more comment on the Herald situation versus Duke. Duke is much wider right away, so it has a lot more ample room for bikeways, especially protected bikeways, whereas Herald is much narrower. And when the community center right on that corner of 72nd and Herald, you really want to look at youth access in particular, especially people who aren't of driving age yet. I think you may want to prioritize getting that bus as close to the community center in as many directions as possible. I don't know if that was a factor or not, but youth access to that community center you should probably preserve as safely as possible.
Yeah, we heard pretty strongly from the Parks Bureau that the community center has so many programs and classes and youth programs that people are going to, that it would be a really good generator of transit ridership. Whereas on Duke, it does go by a park, Brentwood Park, but that park doesn't have so many activities and classes and things like that. So it doesn't actually, they don't see a lot of transit ridership at that park compared to Mount Scott Community Center.
Terrific. I see there's one extra question, but in keeping with the agenda, I think we should move on. Could I email the team the question just for follow-up?
Sure.
Fantastic. So I'll save that and get it to the team, and just thank you all so much for working on this project and your time tonight and sharing with the committee the updates. Really appreciate it so much.
Of course, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Julia.
Have a good night.
Nice to see you.
Hi, Julia. So up next, we have Building a Better 82nd Avenue project from PBOT. So without further ado.
Can you enable my screen sharing, Machu?
Sure thing. All right, you should be able to now.
Okay, terrific. I also I appreciate your commitment to adhering to the agenda, Machu. I was like, at the end of the night, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna actually get to present here. So hi everyone. Thanks for hanging in there till the end of the meeting tonight. I'm here to talk about Building a Better 82nd Avenue project. I'm having a little bit of trouble advancing my slides, which is not great, but let me try and stop this. Actually, it's frozen. Machu, can you take control back and then let me try it again? Okay.
All right.
Cool. All right. Great. So my name is Julia Reed. I'm a senior transportation planner with PBOT, and I'm the program manager for PBOT's Building a Better 82nd Avenue investment program. And okay, so it's not a surprise to anyone here that 82nd Avenue has been the historic dividing line. It's a historic, real and symbolic dividing line between neighborhoods to the east and neighborhoods to the west. And the Building a Better 82nd Avenue program, now that 82nd Avenue is under local control, we are working to better connect the neighborhoods on both sides. So the jurisdictional transfer is complete. That happened this summer on June 1st. The city manages 82nd from Northeast Lombard to the county line, which is Southeast Klotz. Investment is going to take place on 82nd Avenue in 2 stages, one now and one that starts in 2026. And that's due largely to timing of when state and federal funds are made available to do the work. So by the end of 2026, 82nd Avenue is going to be a significantly different place than it is today. There will be more trees, more street light. There's going to be more street lighting, fully accessible pedestrian curb ramps and crossings, landscape medians in some locations, and it's going to be a safer street than it is today. So this is a little infographic that shows what the conditions are today for street lighting, crossing, paving, and traffic signals, and where we will be by the end of 2026. So we're going to meet 100% of 82nd Avenue's lighting needs, and this is a big safety improvement. This is, and the type of lighting I'm talking about is lighting that illuminates the roadway. We're going to meet 75% of the crossing needs with newer upgraded crossings signals on 82nd Avenue. And this winter, we're going to upgrade signage throughout the corridor. In the summer, we're going to start construction of the street lighting and infill street lighting infill, and construct 6 new crossings of 82nd. So at Ash, Beach, Klickitat, Schuyler, Clinton, and Schuler. And it's these improvements that we're making are all things that I want to mention, they're all things that were identified in the 2019 82nd Avenue plan. And after this initial work, there's still going to be a lot to do on 82nd Avenue because there's a lot of needs. So most of you know 82nd Avenue is a high crash corridor. I don't need to belabor this. We're working to improve safety, especially for pedestrians, and that's the core of our work for 82nd Avenue. The heat map on the right side of the page shows where the largest number of Vision Zero crashes were located along the corridor. And there were, looking at all crashes, there were nearly 2,000 crashes on 82nd Avenue in a 5-year period of time between 2015 and 2019. More pedestrian fatalities than any other mode. So we've analyzed the crash data and we've determined the most significant factors contributing to those crashes, and we're working to address those particularly dark conditions and left turns that are happening away from signals. They're things that we're beginning to address directly in our nearest term work. So we know there's a lot of community priorities that are beyond transportation for 82nd Avenue. I've listed some of them on this slide: houselessness, crime, interest in more trees and landscaping, interest in wider sidewalks, land use, housing affordability, safety in all of its forms, and many, many more than what I've listed here. Quick look at our schedule, because I want to save time at the end of this so we can have questions and discussion. So we're in the listening and learning phase now. We're going to move into opportunities and alternatives this winter. That's going to be followed by prioritizing draft projects and then finalizing recommendations next fall. A little snapshot of what we've been doing in terms of engagement so far. We've had 10 community events. These have been pop-up events that we are doing at places where people are already gathering. So Montevilla Street Fair, Movie in the Park at Glen Haven Park, Hmong New Year celebration, which was just last weekend, Apano Community Resource Fair, walks with Oregon Walks, and presentations to groups like this, and work with McDaniel High School. We have a student project that's focused on transportation and governance, and they're using 82nd Avenue, which is right at their front door. We've also mailed 18,000 postcards to businesses and residents. If you live close to 82nd Avenue, you may have received one of those in the fall. And we're translating all of our online open house critical information into 5 languages. So that was a quick run through. I know folks have been talking to the group for the last little bit. I want to pause and take some questions.
Well, thanks, Julia. Was there any questions from the group tonight on 82nd Avenue? There's a question from Doug.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a question for the traffic engineering profession in general. And traffic engineers have not figured out that headlights shining in drivers' eyes are the main reason that drivers can't see pedestrians, because you cannot light pedestrians bright enough, or your profession is not doing it. I mean, PBOT recently did some improvements on East Burnside, and I went out there, looked at them, measured them, and they look good until a car comes the other way, and then you're blinded again. I mean, if you want drivers to see pedestrians, you have to make the pedestrians brighter lit than the oncoming headlights, or get out there and enforce the aiming of headlights, or the national standard should not allow headlights to be up so high that they're shining in drivers' faces. So I really don't have much hope that increased lighting is going to come anywhere near to the level it needs to be for drivers to be able to see pedestrians. So I don't know, you have any thoughts on that I am missing?
Sure, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Zef.
I have thoughts. I mean, I definitely take your point, and there's not a lot we can do about the headlights exactly, but what we are doing is providing better lighting at crosswalks and positioning the lights so that the pedestrians are front lit rather than backlit. We did some research a while back that showed that was a really big cause of lack of visibility, was just that the lights were kind of positioned incorrectly. So a lot of the lighting work we're doing is just adjusting the locations of the lights so they're shining right at the pedestrian, so they are lit up.
Yeah, I saw that on the East Burnside ones. It's definitely an improvement. It's just it still doesn't nowhere near it comes to balancing out to the oncoming headlights.
Doing the best we can.
See, John has his hand up.
Yes, hi.
I'm a guest, but I'm with South Tabor Neighborhood Association. So we intersect 82nd between Division and Powell. And I'm glad Doug asked the question he asked. I was kind of curious about the same thing when you talked about lighting, what types of lighting. And I guess I would also ask if in areas that are supposed to be more of these like community centers, if the lighting would not transition, but include kind of pedestrian level lighting to sort of make that place feel like a safer place to walk, given the, increased volume of pedestrians in those areas.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. Mike, I see you nodding your head vigorously. Do you want to take that one?
Sure. Hi, John. Thanks. Good question about lighting. Yeah, so if you've been around, you'll see in some areas we do have a right-of-way standard that includes pedestrian scale lighting. It's a nice placemaking feature. It has a safety benefit. It can also increase feelings of personal security for people walking down the street. All good things that we want when we want to promote more walking on these major streets. And so that's something we're considering and looking at as a part of a potential right-of-way standard in that could be triggered upon redevelopment. That's how we did it on MLK, which I think is a pretty good comparable street to similar old state highway that was transitioned to the city that over time took on a more human scaled environment, still has room to grow as well. So it's definitely on the table. I think just to be totally transparent, the big consideration that we have is we want to make the right-of-way standard that we're asking developers to build when we build sidewalks and build that kind of frontage area an achievable thing that doesn't tamp down potential development opportunities. We hear a lot from folks that we want to see more affordable housing, more affordable commercial, more development activity, more community serving use on the street. And so we want to balance that, realizing that in the nearest term possible with also achieving that type of streetscape design. So I don't know, there's a lot for us to explore there. That's something that we'll definitely be looking at and weighing in with community over the next 6 months to a year while we are in the planning phase for this next phase of investment.
Great, thanks. Could you just clarify, so the right-of-way standard, would that vary along the roadway depending on, say, how that property is zoned that fronts the street, or is it just one for the whole street?
Yeah, probably not based on like site specific zoning, but more based on whether that section of 82nd Avenue is in what's called a pedestrian district, which is a combination of comp plan centers. I'm sorry, I'm getting really wonky here, so buckle up, everyone. And also within a half a mile of a MAX station. So that would apply in places like Jade, Foster, around the MAX station, and Montevilla, and then up in the Roseway section near Sandy Boulevard.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Is there any examination of like transit enhancements, maybe consolidation, and/or is that currently part of this plan, or is that just like a separate thing because TriMet?
It is part of this plan, and PBOT is working really closely with Metro and TriMet on the transit alternatives analysis that they are doing for 82nd Avenue. And while it's called transit alternatives, it's not like they're looking at bus. It is going to be a version of bus, not any other mode, but the alternatives are more have to do with where priority could be given to bus, ways in which the bus can help increase speed and reliability for the system overall, and for people making short and long trips on 82nd Avenue. And they are hoping to to pursue federal funding for a small starts transit project similar, which is where the funding came from on division to buy the larger buses and to do the station improvements and the real-time boarding or on-time arrival information, real-time arrival.
It's exciting news to hear. Josh, you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering how this how this initial crop of changes and plans was sort of roughed out and planned, given a price tag so that the road could ultimately be transferred. Sort of coming at this because, like, well, one thing we're hearing from ODOT is they're dragging their feet a bit on transferring Powell, because they say, well, we don't really know what the community wants. And we say, well, there wasn't an exact, corner by corner plan for 82nd either, but that happened. Like, so I'm curious how that sort of happened at a level that they were, comfortable with, or, how was that price tag arrived at that everyone was comfortable with?
Yeah, so that was a process that PBOT and ODOT entered into jointly once it became clear that jurisdictional transfer was on the table. We worked together and we negotiated over every single item. We didn't start from nothing, so we did have the 2019 82nd Avenue plan, which PBOT and ODOT worked on together. It was not an incredibly detailed plan, I would say, but it did identify crossing locations. So that was really helpful. So we had a list of everywhere there should be a safe pedestrian crossing. It identified lighting needs, it identified sidewalk needs, all kinds of things. And we basically took that for the safety improvements. And then we also identified anywhere that traffic signals didn't meet our standards, like they're just on span wire versus having the metal mast arms overhead. And included money to redo those. And we also did a cost estimate for how much it would take to repave the entire road and do all the ADA corner ramps. And so we just kind of added all that together, and there was a negotiation process with ODOT. And you'll be glad to hear that we've already started that process for Inner Powell, and we're basically following the same methodology that we used for 82nd. Inner Powell has a plan from 2007 that we can draw from. So it's a little old, but still has a lot of crossing locations identified, a lot of medians and safety improvements. And so we're kind of doing the same thing. We're combing through all those past plans and putting together a needs inventory for both asset management and safety improvements.
Thanks.
This might be like too much information, but I'm curious, from that 2007 Powell plan, is there kind of a preliminary cost estimate of those crossing improvements?
There are some, but they're really out of date at this point. I mean, costs have really risen dramatically since 2007. Inflation has hit transportation harder than probably anything else. So we're really starting from scratch as far as doing cost estimates. But because of all the work on 82nd, we really have a good idea now how much a new traffic signal costs, how much a new crossing costs, how much repaving costs. So I think we're in pretty solid shape to come up with a cost estimate. We know that it's going to be much higher than the $30 million that ODOT said it costs. They did a study a couple of years ago that was really flawed. They didn't take into account a lot of the needs on the corridor. And so we said no thank you to that $30 million price tag, and we think it's much higher.
Well, yeah, definitely excited to learn what lessons come out of the 82nd Avenue process here, particularly for like cost estimates and Powell. It's something that the committee is very actively interested and engaged with. So look forward to like any estimates that come from that.
Totally. I think, this team, Zef, Julia, myself, Bryan, if and when there's a project with Powell, will be a lot of the same folks on hand. And so hopefully we'll be able to, kind of quickly transfer what we learned from this process, which has been a great experience so far, honestly. I have a question for you all. Machu, maybe I'll pose it to you, but maybe expand it to the larger group is, you know, we're going to be working on this project, you know, very rapidly, and we want to have good engagement with you all, good checkpoints, good, you know, ways of checking in and sharing information and getting feedback and really understanding where you're at as we move along. And you know, is visiting this body virtually the best way to do that? Are there other methods that have been successful for you? We'll have a number of open houses and surveys and, you know, neighborhood walks and bike rides and, you know, bus tours and all the above over the next year. But is there something specific that we should think about when we're thinking about how to engage with this group specifically?
I think one thing that might be helpful to consider is like the critical fixes in the short term. If you read through the plan, it identifies a lot in Northeast, the northern segment of A2nd in the next year, which includes basically everything north of 84, if I understood that map correctly, the plan. And then the next year is everything south to the county line. So to me, it kind of seems like maybe if there's any key input, public input timelines or points, that'd be key, but also maybe an update on what that first round crossing critical fixes looks like in Northeast. And then the second round, like how that's feeling to the community and like what they can anticipate in the next year for 84 down to the county line might be a good general strategy there.
Okay. Yeah, so our first wave, actually, it's a little confusing. There's like many waves and segments, but is really focused on roughly like Division or Mill down to the county line, and then over by McDaniel High School, so from Schuyler to Fremont. And then we'll have another wave of investment that comes along with this next planning phase from 84 or Tillamook area down to the Division area. And so there's a lot to figure out in that section. That's where the sidewalks are you know, really most efficient and throughout the corridor. And so yeah, we'll plan on coming back here and sharing that information. We'll you know, and also when we get into the, you know, the space where we're weighing trade-offs, where we're, you know, we need input to help make a difficult decision, we'll definitely include this group as a place that we visit and engage with and share information early with, because we want to make sure, yeah, we give you plenty of time to engage with us.
Well, thank you so much for making it out tonight. You know, we scheduled you until 8:50, so you've stayed beyond that time. So I don't want to hold up your evenings any further, but I really appreciate the team coming out and giving an update to the committee tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good holiday and yeah, enjoy the little bit of sunshine we have. I think it's supposed to start raining again here soon, so.
Yeah, that's what I saw too. All things come and go. Well, have a good evening, you all. So we'll keep the meeting open for a few more minutes. But just thanks again, Mike, Zef, and Julia.
Yep. Take care. Bye.
So we are scheduled to end at 9. So just want to open the floor to like any comment or thoughts or discussion if you'd like. And if there is none, that's okay too. Can always just adjourn for the evening.
Hi, I was just wondering, when is this meeting, the recording, going to be available?
As soon as it finishes uploading, so I could email it out to you. Anyone else that would like it, just let me know. And if you registered for this meeting, I should have your email saved in the log online.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'd like to see it. I had a little we had a mouse in the house, and
Oh, no.
so I missed part of the meeting.
Yeah, I'll make sure
Yeah,
to get to
running
you.
around chasing the mouse. So anyway, thank you. Appreciate it.
Just making a note here. All right. And like I said, I will save the chat, and if your questions weren't answered, I'll definitely make sure to email the project teams so they can get back to you with some answers to your questions. So I'm just going to save it right now so I don't forget that. All right, well, have a good evening, everyone, and we'll see you soon. Stay safe out there.
Thanks, Machu.
Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Oh yeah, happy holidays.
Thanks.